To celebrate in a permanent and visible way the arrival of two of our ancestors 144 years ago today. In coming here, you honour them and you honour your own heritage. These two people, William and Elizabeth Massey, were 21 years old and had been married for only 6 months. We do not know what motivated them to accept an assisted passage on a sailing boat to Australia. We do know that William did not come from a poor family. We have a copy of his grandfather's will. In this will, for which probate was granted in 1846, 9 years before William was born, his grandfather left his property to his wife and children. The property consisted of horses, harness and cart, at least £300 sterling, a dwelling house and furniture, and unspecified land, tenements, houses and ships. In the application for probate in 1846, the document said that the whole estate was valued at less than £2,000. Just how much £2,000 was is demonstrated by the report about the arrival of the passengers on the Renfrewshire in Brisbane in 1875. There were 328 immigrants on board for the journey out to Australia, and as was the custom, the passengers deposited their money for safekeeping with the captain of the ship. It was said in very complimentary terms that altogether the 328 immigrants had over £1,000 in hard cash. So if William's grandfather had an estate approaching £2,000 in 1846, it was a very substantial estate. 1846 was at the height of the Irish potato famines, when up to 1 million people in Ireland died of hunger. So to be comparatively wealthy at that time was special. William's father received nearly half of the estate, so it is likely that William had a quite pleasant upbringing. William's father's trade was listed as reed maker. We do not know just how comfortable William's life was as he was growing up, but we do know that William and Elizabeth were married in the substantial church of St Anne's of Belfast. The report of the arrival of the Renfrewshire reads in part, "It is worthy of note that of the 328 immigrants by this vessel, 133 are assisted, as were William and Elizabeth, 29 remittance, and 12 full-paying passengers." I had to go to Google to find out just what a remittance passenger was. What I found was that a remittance person, almost always a young man, was one whose family paid his fare out to the colonies and then sent him an allowance, usually monthly, on the condition that he never returned to England. There were 29 of these remittance men on this one boat from Glasgow. Elizabeth's life before she was married is largely unknown to us. She was born in Rathfreyland, County Down, in Northern Ireland, the same county where William was born. Their marriage certificate states that they were married on the 30th of March 1875, and we know that only 3.5 months later they travelled from Belfast to Glasgow and boarded the Renfrewshire for Brisbane. They left Glasgow on about the 18th of June 1875, and the journey took 103 days. We also know from a birth certificate that on the 11th of December 1875, notably 8.5 months after they were married, and only 2.5 months after they arrived in Brisbane, their daughter Annie Jane Catherine Massey was born. The Renfrewshire arrival documents show that William and Elizabeth had been given a land grant in Queensland. Of the next 30 years of their lives, from 1875 to 1905, we know very little. It has been said that they lived in rental houses in West End, but we do know that in the next 12 years after they arrived, they had 6 children. These were Annie Jane Catherine, born 1875, Henry William Robert, born in 1877, but he lived only 7 months, Eva Isabella, born on the 13th of June 1878, Frederick Ernest, born on the 20th of December 1883, Lillian Ethel Louise, known as Louis, born on the 5th of February 1886, and my grandmother, Ruby May, born on the 27th of September 1887. In researching the lives of these two people and their descendants, I've had some enthusiastic helpers. Our cousin Greg, who lives in Melbourne, has been tireless in his research, and I thank him very much. Friends who have supported us and who here today are Kay Sticklin, Ron and Sandra, Lolene and Brian, and Joe and Liz. Our friends Fred and Mina Drake, who are also here with us today, had a particular connection with William and Elizabeth. It was Mina's great-grandfather, Thomas Matthews, who developed the streets at Highgate Hill, where in 1905 the Masseys bought a house allotment. Thomas Matthews named the streets of the subdivision after his 7 daughters, and the allotment that the Masseys bought was number 20 Louisa Street. On this allotment there was a house called Hillview. We do not know whether the house was already on the land when the Massey family bought it, or whether it was built afterwards, but since the allotment had been owned by one Johann Sattler since 1888, I'm inclined to think that the house was on the land in 1905. This house became the centre of the Massey family life for the next 60 years. It is said that when you buy a house, you also buy your neighbours. In the case of the Masseys buying at 20 Louisa Street, this was especially true. Next door was the Gillespie family. On the 29th September 1885, again an auspicious date, one Henry Murphy bought the house next door. Less than 2 years later, it was transferred to Mary Murphy, and the title deed records that Mary Murphy then married John Gillespie. These were the neighbours in 1905 when the Masseys bought 20 Louisa Street. The two families became friends. The friendship lasted for 61 years and continued over the next 3 generations. Members of the two families are still friends today. It was always family legend that William and Elizabeth bought the land and then built their house, but we now know that they never owned it. It is certain that they lived there with their children until all of the children, except Aunt Anne, were married, with the last child to marry being their youngest daughter Ruby in 1919. William and Elizabeth then continued to live in the house with their unmarried daughter Annie for the rest of their lives. Ruby was 32 years old when she married in 1919, and she had lived in the house for 14 years, but she had lived there only during her adult life. Another legend recounted by some of Ruby's descendants is that she worked for over 10 years and helped pay the mortgage, but then when her parents died, she got nothing. The eldest Massey daughter, Annie, never married and lived at Hillview from 1905 until she died in 1966 at the age of 90. Elizabeth, her mother, died in 1921 of the Spanish flu, and William died in 1928 at the age of 74. When she bought the property in 1905, Aunt Anne was 30 years old, and Ruby, the youngest child, was 18. Ruby certainly lived there with her parents and siblings until she married in 1919. The family story was that William left the house to Aunt Anne. This is one of the many family stories that I will explore at lunchtime. But in coming here today, you are honouring these two ancestors, but you're also honouring the generations yet to come. Now that you've made this effort to be here and have taken the interest in their lives, their memory will not be lost. You and your children and all of your descendants, no matter what happens in the world, will know where this branch of the family came from, and you will have knowledge that you can hand on. Just before I ask 2 of the great-great-great-grandchildren to unveil the headstone, I invite everyone to join us at Cansdale Street for lunch. And I want to thank Ryan, Katrin and our grandson William for helping today. Ryan will be at the gate at 15 Cansdale Street to show you where to park, and Katrin will be at the front door to welcome you and guide you to the restaurant. Now it is my great pleasure and pride to ask Morgan and Sam to come forward and to unveil the headstone. In this grave are Elizabeth, who was buried in 1921, and then 18 months later, one of her grandsons died as an infant, and he's in there too. Then in 1928, William, her husband, died, and he's buried there. And then in 1966, Annie, Aunt Anne, as we knew her, she died, and she's buried there. And I think my mother, who's here today, was here when Aunt Anne was buried. Is that right? You don't remember? That's okay. But it is true. Mother was here. Mother used to go to all the funerals. But that was 1966 when Aunt Anne died. Okay, well, thank you very much, and I'll see you all back at lunch, and we'll have some fun speeches there. Thank you for coming.